Welcome to the Beyond Atheism podcast with me, Nathan Alexander, and my co-host, Todd Tavares. Moving beyond questions of God's existence, this podcast asks, what's next in a world without God? If you're enjoying the show so far, make sure to like and subscribe, rate and review, and consider supporting us on Patreon.
Welcome back to Beyond Atheism. After taking some time off to attend to changing life circumstances, Nathan and I are ready to slide back into a regular scheduled podcasting. Today we're going to have a soft restart by looking at Atheist Overreach, the problem of the atheist revolution going too far and facing blowback for implementing a social system rife with problems it cannot address. This is due to the ignorant short-sightedness of these insidious atheists. This problem, rooted in the atheist philosophy, is the topic of the book Atheist Overreach by Christian Smith. You'll be shocked to find this is not actually our view, but by that of a different author. Today, Nathan and I will review the book. Nathan, why did you want to read this book?
Well, I guess I should say it's good to be back.
Oh,
Good
it
to
is
be,
excellent.
yes.
It's good
Good
to talk to you again. It's been so
Yes.
long.
Yeah, all right.
I hope everything's been okay. I haven't
Yeah.
heard from you.
No, right. Yeah. No, things have been good. Uh, so anyway, that having said that, I guess I thought it would be interesting to talk about this book is because it's from the perspective of it's an academic perspective, but it's not a strict like defense of Christianity or even like a refutation of atheism per se. It's sort of looking at a couple of claims where the author says atheists sort of overreach in their argumentation. Like they just go a little bit further than the evidence or whatever permits them to go. So, and I think he does like the author does try to be balanced, I think. And I think his arguments sometimes there's something to them. So I mean, at least they're sort of good fodder for discussion. So that's why I thought it might be a good topic.
Yeah, and because we both read this book, and I was curious at first, like why, like where this thing came from. But even the author's introduction and his explanation of why he wrote it, I thought was significant. Like it's that it's not an apology, which is weird because normally we would expect this to become like you can kind of map out what the book's going to do, right? It's going to be like, oh, these crazy atheists, they got everything wrong, and at the very end be like, if only they followed Jesus. But it's not that at all. He doesn't have any real apology for religion, which is interesting. So that's not in there. And he treats it as a sort of overview and introduction to what a lot of what he feels atheist philosophy entails, and writes it in a very approachable style.
Yeah,
These are good things.
yeah, and it's a short book too. Pretty
That's
short.
also a good thing. We always love
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. You always have to appreciate books that are short.
that. Yeah, let's just get to the point. Tell us
Yeah.
speaking of which, getting to the point. So what is basically, if let's start off with the main ideas and then start to dig into some of it. What is his main concern with this atheist overreach?
Well, I think his point is that yeah, secularization is happening and atheists are becoming more and more numerous, and and like if they sort of implement their ideas, then this could be disastrous because they're not fully thought through, maybe. And I think the main thing I think is the issue of morality, and I think that's what we'll focus most on. He's got most of the book is really focused on that, but he's got some other stuff as well to say that we could talk about later. But I think the morality thing is the key argument.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely what stood out to me is that he's interested in this notion of what are the moral standards that secular people are justified in upholding. And this what struck me about it is that I think for him, for the author, it's a bit of an intellectual exercise. But what started to really strike me as I got more into the book and took it seriously was that this is a real issue for atheists. It's an issue for atheists to wrap their heads around now because we are going to take over. We're not gonna. It's not in terms of militant atheism. It's not gonna. It's not about eradicating religion from the earth, but certainly about becoming a majority. Right? We see that coming, and not just. It's not just this. Let's sit back and wait for this, demographic shift. People are putting in effort, right? Where people are changing minds, people are talking, people are organizing, people are working to build and grow this. And it's going to happen. There are going to be more atheists. And when that happens, what are the changes going to be to a democratic society? And what's that going to do to the religious minority? They are going to have concerns, right? And what are we going to need to do to either assuage their concerns or address them, right? Address problems where we may be ignorant, we may be blind, we may be harmful to them without realizing it. So he starts with this idea of the moral standards. Walk us through it. What's he talking about there? Where do we go wrong?
I think he's got two main criticisms, sort of atheist morality. I think and I think they're sort of related. Basically, that he says atheists, there's various different moral systems, and they could maybe justify being a moral person, like to your friends and your family and even people in your own society, but it doesn't really justify caring about people on the other side of the world. Like there's no reason for him, like in an atheist worldview, why you should care about someone on the other side of the world. And a related, a related point, and maybe we could talk about both of them at the same time, is there's nothing also in an atheist worldview to permit or to forbid someone from sort of being what he calls a sensible knave, which is someone they could sort of cheat the moral system. Like they'll disobey the moral system when it suits them, like when it's in their interest to kind of, steal the money when no one's looking or something like
Right.
that, and
Yeah.
there's no chance of being caught.
Yeah.
Basically, he says, like, from the atheist point of view, there's really nothing you can say to that person that will convince them to to not steal the money or whatever. So there are these two kind of related things about, like, there's no reason for like a universalist morality, and also there's nothing to prevent like these sort of sensible knaves from cheating the moral system.
Well, let's get into the like this universalization idea. What when we talk about a universal law, what are we talking about here?
Well, I guess it's something that would apply to all people. I mean, like, where like, you don't have a separate standard for someone from another country or another race or whatever. Something that applies universally.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, okay, here's an interesting thing about this perspective. So when he goes after moralizing, one thing that we already know about being an atheist, not all atheists have a moral argument.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We we've talked to some who do, and they have different roots for where morality comes from. We've talked to some who deny moral systems can exist. Atheism does not have in it a moral system. It doesn't advocate a moral system. What it says is that there's no separate supernatural lawgiver. That's it, right? So if we're thinking about a moral system, the critique that an atheist launches against any sort of religion is that whatever the chain is, right? It's like the way a child argues, right? It's wrong to do this. Why is it wrong to do this? Well, because we're this that's how we're raised. Why we're raised that way? Because that's the way we've always done it. Why is that the way we've always done it? Because of God. Boom. That's the problem. You cut that part out, and it's the exact same argument if you live in a world where there's no supernatural deity. So we don't we can live in a moral system in which it's not provided by a deity, or we can just ignore it and say, well, they're constructions, we make them up socially, we put them together, we abide by them here, we don't abide by them there, they fit different milieus, they're not universal, they're morally relative, right? They're relative to the society, so on and so forth. So he's focusing on a very specific aspect of morality. And you know what I think is going to happen a lot in this one, Nathan, is I'm going to slip into a very defensive mode where we talk about I don't know if you were there for this. I would occasionally run a atheist self-defense class
Hmm.
that would just go through very common arguments and what the
Right.
answers are,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
and just establishing what it is that we are, right? And this is one of the things that comes up, right? Is that we can follow a moral code, it's just that it doesn't come from God. Just like religious people follow a moral code that they never personally get from God. Someone
Yeah.
tells them
Yeah.
to do it. The people
Hmm.
around them do it. The people around them establish how to behave. They show them how to behave. And that's how we learn our morality. It's not really any different. Except here he's saying that it's universal humanism, right? So he's taking these particular atheists that he read about, the loudest atheists, and said, well, okay, let's have these guys stand in for all atheists. And he points to universal humanism, inclusive universal humanism. I think he had some other stuff to that, right? Like human rights, equality, equitable distribution, individual freedom. And which no, so the thing I love about this argument, Nathan, is that what the author argues about in terms of overreach and this moral problem, trying to create these universal laws, he's talking about the liberal project, right? He's talking about liberalism.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Hmm.
amazing. Liberalism is a secular project. That's fantastic.
Yeah. I guess you would say that it's sort of like illusory or something that they there's no actual grounds for believing it. I mean, I guess like there's many responses to him. I mean, I think one is to say that like you were sort of mentioning it earlier, that most people don't really come up with like a moral philosophy. Like they don't write a treatise on morality and then they're like, here's my morality. It's just like it's some of it is instinctual and some of it like is learned through socialization and stuff like that. And maybe like some of it might be, talking with friends about particular issues or something, but it's not. I don't think it's most people are like, they'll read utilitarian philosophy or something to make moral decisions. I mean,
Right? Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
I think it's like it's something, and it's like this in the same way that probably religious people, they get their morality from the same sort of places. So I think that's one kind of response that like morality isn't so we're not getting it necessarily by reading philosophers. I don't think. I mean,
No.
yeah.
I always think of Econ 101 as a moral class, right? Like you always pay as little as you can, sell as for as high as you can. That's your moral duty. You need to maximize your utility. You need to maximize what you receive. You need to give out the least. It's a moral training in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
And if you think about how we are conditioned to for the marketplace, right? It's good to buy things. It's good to get what you want. It's bad to give that up. It's bad to deny yourself the pleasures of owning something.
Hmm. Yeah. I think within that is that there's something in ethical philosophy, I guess, that like by sort of pursuing your own self-interest, you're acting morally. And that's sort of a moral argument or sort of like a moral motivation or something that you don't. behave in an immoral way because it's going to harm your self-interest in the long run or something like that. And I think that that's true, but I think so. He would say, Christian Smith, the author, would say, like, well, what about a case where there's no possible way for your self-interest to be harmed? Like, someone just left their money right there, and like, there's no way anyone will see you. And so if you just take the money, like why would it be immoral to do that? That would be his challenge, I guess.
Yeah, right. Like people are going to do it when nobody's looking, right?
Hmm.
It's a
Hmm.
Glaucon's ring. Well, here's what he I there's a pretty easy answer for this. But let me read his description at length of like the world that we're kind of trapped in under these evil atheists. Because he's setting up sort of like a prisoner's dilemma, right? Where it's we're better off defecting. Because the idea is if we are morally trained, you see money lying in on the ground, through socialization, you teach yourself to leave the money there. But he's saying like this idea of the knave, right, where the rational self is more interested in getting for himself, so we can violate our own morality. So here's the deal. This is from Christian Smith. Recall our atheistic situation. There is no objective external source of moral order, such as God or natural law. Humans invent morality through learning and social contract to make society function better, to benefit themselves. I think that's the collective themselves. People are motivated to follow their culture's moral norms because breaking them will lead to punishment in the short run and unhappiness and reduced well being in the longer run. This kind of enlightened self interest should produce societies of people who are morally good without God. But the fact is that if this is indeed the situation, and a little editorial here, it is, then there is no good reason for perceptive and intelligent persons not to act as Hume's sensible knave, meaning the fictional character who is moral most of the time but bends the rules or uses loopholes when it works to his advantage, if they so desire. This is completely accurate, with one exception. There are laws. That's the whole
Hmm.
point, right?
Yes, right, exactly. Yes. Yeah.
So I what I love about this is I think that is such a great encapsulation of atheist belief, right? That like there's no God, there's no natural moral order. We have to create it ourselves. We find ways to motivate people to do it and to do ourselves, and we punish people when they break it, and that's through laws,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, I see this all the time. We'd like if you are, I mean, if you cut a line, look, there's some stuff we know people defect all the time. People
Yeah.
jump the turnstiles at the subway, take a penny, leave a penny, the little free book library that you have in town where everybody takes the good books, nobody brings good books back. You know what I
Right.
mean? And we know you're doing it, right? We know that these are cases where there's this free rider problem where people
Hmm.
aren't
Hmm.
paying into it.
Hmm.
But we also know that there's lots of punishment. Right? If you cut the line at the deli, someone is going to chew you out,
Yeah.
right? And I see that all the time. People use their horns to let someone know that they need to go in their car. They need to go faster or do something quicker. That's ways that we reinforce this moral order, our social norms that we created. That's part of enforcement. The bigger picture is we use laws, right? We use the weight of the state to coerce people to do it or to punish people for breaking it. That's how this works. Because the flip side of this is God has done a really, really shit job at enforcing moral order, hasn't
Yeah. Yes.
he?
I think,
Like,
and yeah, I think that's the sort of like another kind of critique. I mean, he doesn't really directly defend kind of theistic morality, like it's more a critique of atheist morality, but he does sort of say that, like a theistic morality where there is a kind of divine rewards and punishments. Like, so even if, again, like this stealing the money or something, like you steal the money, no one sees you, there's no chance of getting caught, but like God sees you. And so you're gonna get justice in the end. And he says like there's no kind of secular equivalent to that. And I think that that's probably true. But then if it were true that like the theistic moral system was so good, like why would we need laws? I mean,
Right?
you know,
Yeah. We wouldn't need that at all.
yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, the secular response is what we saw in the Soviet Union, right? It's a totalitarian state.
Well, that's one secular response. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's not
yeah.
this
Hmm.
secular solution. It's the bad example that we don't wanna do.
Yeah, right, right, exactly. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, yeah, right. You could set up a system where like every action was watched by the state or something, but that's not really a desirable alternative either.
No, no, and he says at one point that he thinks certain kinds of theisms provide good reasons for avoiding knavery, right? So avoiding these free riders, which presumably he means it's like this a tyrannical god who's always watching over you,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I mean, this is elf on the shelf thinking here, right? Let's just
yeah.
spy on our children. That'll teach them.
Hmm. Right. Yeah, yeah. I think there is something like there's something to the argument ultimately that if there is like the sensible naive person like and you're arguing with them and they really do lack sort of this moral compass and maybe they would even like they would be good at disguising it so you think they're moral or something, but if you're really arguing with them, I mean maybe there is no way to convince them other than except it's just like, well, that person just is like a sociopath or whatever, like they lack morals, and so we should probably be careful, like, whatever around that person or something. I mean,
Yeah, and this really is a discreet. This is a critique of the rational self-interest that we find in capitalist rationality, right? Which is this idea that if we all pursue our individual rational self-interest, we get sort of a collective positive good. So Adam Smith writes about how you don't have your meal because of people giving you things. It's not benevolence or this like goodwill or peace on earth, goodwill towards men, hippie love didn't produce your dinner. It's the baker and the butcher and the candlestick maker and their
mm-hmm.
rational self-interest, right? Them trying to just make good products, sell it to make money, and we benefited from it, from their rational self-interest. So that perspective, that's the sort of utilitarian perspective, right? How we get to a better world by everyone pursuing their self-interest. He's saying really that anytime you have people just pursue their self-interest, they're going to cheat. And how do we prevent them from cheating?
Yeah, or there's a chance they'll cheat. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's a rational, there's a motivation to do it, right? And we know the ways that we avoid that. We do it in some ways. It's regulation, it's laws, it's. I mean, one of the big ones is if the FBI goes to a member of the mob and says, "We, if you turn on your friends, we'll let you walk away and keep all your money," right? And we know they're not going to do it because the mob would kill that person, right? So you change if you have to change the incentive structure somehow. But this goes back to other issues like it's he also ties this to human rights. So how do you, Nathan, you're a liberal. How do you feel about human rights?
um I think on the whole I'm supportive of human rights. Yeah. um yeah.
Yeah. Do you think they exist? Are they moral facts and imperatives?
I mean, it's probably like a metaphysical question, like whether they exist. But I think yes, like people should respect others' human rights. Yeah, I think that's like a moral imperative, I would say.
So the way, I mean, if we go back to Declaration of Rights of Man,
Uh huh. Like the French Revolution.
yeah,
Uh huh.
but are those treated as natural?
Um.
And how are
Uh.
they treated in where you are in the Canadian context? Do you guys have are your rights natural
As opposed to like from God or something. Is that what you mean, or?
from? Um, from like just by right of birth as a human, you naturally have these. They're not created by the government. They're not created by the state. They're not just social contracts that we. They're not legal fictions.
This might be too much of a tangent, but I mean, I think there's like a difference because so in Canada we have this. It's called the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Um, I'm just looking it up, but I mean, obviously, it's not a document of human rights. It's people. It's like who are Canadian citizens. Although I think it's like people who are in Canada visiting probably are also get most or all of the same protections, I would think. But I think like the human rights stuff of the UN Declaration of Human Rights and stuff, I think that is secular or like natural. I mean, yeah,
Like
I don't know if
in
this
the
is too much of a tangent to go down, but yeah.
no, it's worth considering because like in the American context, it comes from the creator. I think is how it's stated.
Yeah, yeah,
And I Locke, and if you go back to Hobbes, I think it's a natural power. But realistically, as an atheist, like I don't see them as coming from a creator. I think historically, if we think about human rights, the ones that we appreciate that are either in the rights of man or in the UN Declaration on Human Rights, they're very clearly like made up by people. It's a
yeah.
wish list,
I
right?
think that's the key thing. Yeah,
Like it's these are not natural things. You very obviously do not have freedom of speech from birth, right? Like historically, it would be obvious that we had freedom of speech. It's very obvious we don't. There's no Second Amendment in life. Nobody across the epochs of time had rights to guns. These are constructs that are just made up. Um,
yeah, yeah,
but one of the things that comes up in this book is the critique he has about moralizing atheists is that there is no natural reason to believe that there is universal benevolence and human rights as moral facts, which I agree, right? Is we can
yeah.
agree on that, right? That it's not a natural outcome of the universe that we have human rights.
That's true. That's true. I mean, I think you can sort of reason your way there to human rights. And like you could sort of reason your way into like a moral system that respects human rights as like a really good moral system. Do you think?
Well, what would that require? Because here, like what he's telling us, what this author claims is that moralizing atheists, God, wow, this is a heck of a chain, right? Atheists don't believe in God. Some of them want to create morals. One of the morals they create from this chaotic universe without God these human rights. And these human rights come from natural human benevolence to other humans. Is that the order that is that the chain that we create?
Um, I don't know that it's natural benevolence that does it necessarily. I mean, it could be multiple pathways to rights, and I think that is the case. Like, there's all sorts of different like secular and even potentially like religious pathways that are kind of flowing towards the creation of rights. So I don't know that it necessarily depends on like I'm a good person and so therefore I respect your human rights. It could be even like the self-interested thing where it's like, well, I've got my rights, but if I want to convince others to respect my rights, like I need to respect theirs or something. Yeah, that's I don't know. What do you think?
Um, no, people made this stuff up. I'm of the ilk that says human rights are not they're not natural. They don't exist. They're not absolute. They've never been absolute. They are a wonder. They're more aspirational, right?
Yeah, that's
They're
fair.
things that
Yeah.
we came up with, which we've decided this. We think this would be a great way for us to treat each other. And actually, I mean, like we know we can go back and look at the centuries of secular literature written about why we ought to have human rights, right? Why we ought to have liberal institutions, right? We can go back to the 1790s. I think it was when Kant wrote Democratic Peace Theory. right? And the argument being, well, if we have democratic institutions, democracies won't fight other democracies. And if everyone's a democracy, we will end war. Right? I mean, that's okay. So it's theorizing, and then there's theory testing, and then there's putting it into practice across centuries, which has yielded results that are measurable, right? And we know that this is something that works. There are reasons why we have ideas like that. They don't come from nowhere. The Christian Smith makes this argument, right? Which is that every sort of moralizing, philosophizing from the secular world is built is a sandcastle in the air, right? It has no foundation, it has nothing to rest on, and it can barely hold itself together without God,
Yeah,
which is just
that's yeah.
it's absolutely not true. The entire thing was constructed without any supernatural intervention. We've constructed these systems. Human beings constructed these systems. They did it by thinking about it. They thought they did it by constructing them. They thought they recognized where they failed and they tried again. Like it's not based on a notion of human goodness, right? That we have this
Yeah,
universal
yeah.
benevolence that connects us as humans.
Yeah, I think the way he would sort of counter is by saying actually um, that all the sort of secular moral philosophy is sort of like secularized Judeo-Christian philosophy about the idea that God created man in His own image, and therefore basically like everyone should be respected. And then, like, basically, he says, secular thinkers in the Enlightenment or whatever basically just sort of took out the God part.
You know what? As I was reading this is probably like the biggest insight I got from this, because that is such an old trope. And like this time it really stung me. I don't know why. Like it really hit me that um I mean, my normal response to that has always been so what,
Yeah, right,
right?
right, yes.
I have never heard anybody say, you know who played piano? Paul McCartney's father. Paul McCartney's father played piano. So it's not Paul McCartney that wrote, he didn't do anything special. His father's the one who taught him to play piano, got him to play piano. So nobody says that. That's an idiotic argument. But the thing is, Paul McCartney's father did play piano. I don't think this is true. I I've heard this a million times. I've never seen any proof for it. I don't think that atheist humanism is actually an outgrowth of Christianity, because we just don't see it. This is the argument that Western progress or secular progress perhaps is rooted in Christendom, right? And the way he puts it is, in short, the widespread belief of many moderns, whether religious or not, in universal benevolence and human rights can be traced in large part to deep cultural roots in specific religious traditions that for millennia have nurtured a particular vision of universal human dignity, responsibility, and accountability. Um, I don't think that's true at all. We should see it. I mean, it should be something that we're able to map out, but we're not. It's all of a sudden after 1790, people are like,
Right.
"Oh yeah, yeah, that's us. We came up with that."
Yeah,
One of the
yeah, that's a
great,
good point, yes.
yeah, like one of the great historic coincidences that, I mean, for me, it's a lot of flashing red lights. Is 1492, Columbus hits America and kicks off the imperial period, right? Or this rush to conquer the New World. It's the same year that the reconquest of Spain ended, where like the Moors were finally gone. So Spain was now a whole and free of Moors,
Yeah, which
and
is Muslims, I guess.
Muslims, right? So they were like the Muslims. They were the Muslims were small, but they had a system of tolerance where they ruled because they were really small. They were pretty weak, but they implemented religious pluralism, tolerance for different things. They were very pro science, things like that. And then Christendom pushed back, and in 1492, once the Moors are completely out, Spain issued a proclamation on kicking off a Jewish pogrom, meaning they began persecuting Jews. So this is not a, a chain of creating what he talks about as like these deep cultural roots of traditions of millennia of traditions about universal human dignity, responsibility, and accountability. It's persecution, and we see in the New World it's about convert them or kill them. We see after this centuries of justifications for slavery. I don't really think this is an outgrowth of Christianity.
Yeah. I think
It's
that's yeah.
more the authors who do write about both. I think Locke was influenced by the New World, right? He talks about how people live in the New World. Rousseau talks about um, like the wild man, people outside of nature.
Yeah,
I think
noble savage and
the
yes.
noble savage, right? It's all influenced from the New World, and that's where we see this trend. So I think this is rubbish.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Because you could say like why don't you have human rights, or why doesn't Jesus talk about human rights or something,
Yeah,
like
right. Yeah,
why does it take until like the 17th and 18th centuries before you start getting these ideas?
yeah.
Yeah,
We
and
just
yeah.
don't see
Mhm,
it, and
mhm.
like we don't see. I mean, like, yeah. What's the Christian position on you know working hours, right? Like, what's the
Right.
appropriate number of hours to work?
Hmm, hmm.
That's right, and or like, yeah, what mechanization? What's their position on union organizing?
Yeah, yeah,
Should they be
or
allowed on
yeah.
private property
Hmm,
during non-working hours?
yeah, or like child labor or something like
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Yeah, great one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And I think, I mean, the same issue. I was listening to this other kind of podcast, and they were talking about like slavery, and the guy was sort of saying like, well, like the slavery, like anti-slavery movement was all like basically Christian and so on, and like, and I mean, again, it's like, um, why don't we see anti-slavery right from the beginning of Christianity? Why does it take, uh, up until again like the 1700s and 1800s before slavery is abolished and so on? Yeah, I think that's a good challenge. And like I think so this is sort of moving into more like kind of empirical critiques maybe of his argument, like that actually like not only are can secular people be moral, they're actually maybe like more moral than Christianity.
how
um, a-
about that? Yeah, right.
and you can see this sort of historically, that as the West and the world, I guess, is secularized, not that it's been a straightforward sort of straight line to progress or whatever, but like I mean, like things definitely have improved in terms of ending slavery, ending or like women's rights and things like this. And also, and then like if you're looking today, like in our previous podcast with Phil Zuckerman, talking just about on so many metrics, if you look at how secular a country is, you can see it's probably doing better on these particular metrics like violence or something like that.
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Healthcare, women's
hmm,
rights, things like
hmm,
that.
hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we're confronted with this, right, like this idea that, well, it's this outgrowth of Christianity. Western liberal democratic societies are outgrowths of their, Christian history, and Christians were at the forefront of feminism, anti-slavery, war resistance, all that stuff, right? That's always true. It's absolutely always true. They're also at the forefront of like
Right.
patriarchy,
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
pro-war,
Hmm, hmm.
pro-slavery arguments, and like it's atheists should also admit that, yeah, like atheism doesn't have a great track record at this either, right? Like the free thinkers were not the most open-minded, right? There are plenty of non-theistic pro-slavery arguments. There are plenty that use science, right? We still see that people that use pseudoscience. But if you're getting the exact same results from two different systems, and one claims that there is a divine, all-knowing, all-powerful entity that loves you and is good, and it gets the same results as a system that says, no, there isn't. It's just us trying to figure shit out. This tacked on deity is meaningless. It's worthless, right? You're getting the same results as if he's not there. That tells you he's not there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We've got fans.
Yeah. And I think, like, sort of a related issue, and again, like, he's not really defending theistic morality in as much as critiquing atheist morality, but I think that the other critique is like, which theistic morality, and like, how do you know which is the right rule? Like, I mean, given that pretty much any position, any kind of moral position can be defended with greater or lesser ability, like, from the Bible, like slavery. I mean, you can find verses that support it and some that oppose it. I mean, like, how are you making those determinations? Like, how are you reading the Bible in such a way, like, that you're getting that morality? Like, yeah.
Right? Yeah,
Hmm.
even
Like,
with the word
yeah.
of God, how do you know which word is the
Yes,
right word?
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And I think this is like the whole dilemma. Like, it's like, if you're choosing particular verses in the Bible that you believe, that means you already have an external source of morality to begin with. So, and then you're applying it to the Bible or something. So, yeah, which is the same sort of thing that secular people have to do, like creating their own moral system.
right. Yeah.
Mm,
But
yeah.
I mean, these are things that I haven't thought about in a long time. And it's interesting to see that when people think hard about what's wrong with atheism, these are the issues that they bring up, right? Like your moral compass can never be true. And how do we address that? And it's something we got to be prepared for, right? If we're going to, like, how are we going to create a future society? What are they going to believe in? How do we come to that?
Yeah. I think in one positive thing to say about him is that he doesn't say that atheists are like necessarily immoral or something like that, or that they have no reasons to be good or something. Um, and I think that's maybe to his credit. But just one other point, one other point I want to make too is just that these are difficult issues. Like, in some ways, it would solve a lot of problems if God just like appeared to us and said, like, here's the exact moral code you should follow. That would solve a lot of problems. But we're not in that world though, so we are kind of stuck, like, figuring out ourselves, and it will be kind of messy. Obviously, like, there's not an obvious answer, like, to his sensible naive person. Like, there's no knockdown argument for someone who just sort of refuses to abide by sort of social society's morality, other than, like, like we were saying before about, like, the force of the law or social stigma or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. It's like it's well, one of the things that becomes clear about this sort of critique is that it's kind of just a critique of the modern world, right?
Mm. Hmm.
That
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
it sounds a lot like, like get off my lawn. Kids these days with their skateboards.
Mm.
They're all gay and
Yeah.
they're all straight and it scares me. Without, you know what it is? They think things like, without God, girls will become boys and boys will marry boys and everyone will smoke marijuana, right? It's
Hmm.
like, Grandma, that's true. That's like
All
that's
right.
yeah.
Yeah. Right.
That,
Yes.
that's where we are. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Um, did you want to talk a little bit about the other, just very briefly, about some of the other arguments, or do you want to talk about Aristotle,
Um,
or both?
Give me a second here. Let me consult my notes because there was something else that I think I copied at length that I thought was interesting. I don't know. Let me just read a long passage. He's talking about naturalism's morality, which is interesting because we just talked about this, right? Like drawing how we can draw morality from nature, right? Which is kind of true, right? It's one of the sources that we're going to use no matter what. Christian Smith writes about naturalism's morality. Suppose we could completely eliminate from our minds and practices the enduring cultural and institutional influences of the Jewish and Christian metaphysics and moral orders that naturalism tells us are groundless. Okay, boom, done. Suppose we could also eliminate the other culturally humanistic traditions, such as Enlightenment humanism, that have been at least indirectly dependent on transcendent or theistic metaphysics and moralities. If we could thus start from scratch in a naturalistic universe, not confused by superstitions and errors, if we could exercise complete intellectual honesty in considering the moral beliefs and commitments that would be fitting for and reasonably defensible in a naturalistic universe, what kind of morality might we come up with? What moral order would make sense given naturalism's picture of reality? Um, well, one is hard pressed. He gives his own answer here in that it's no answer. Well, one is hard pressed to come up with an answer because it is not clear that in a naturalistic universe there are normative sources that exist apart from people, which I think is perfect. That is sort of the atheist moral project, isn't it? To say, like, if we get rid of all of this, what is it that we want? And we as humans have this power. The normative sources are people. That's all it is. That's who always made these laws,
Yeah. Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. Go ahead.
right? I mean, the thing is, it's getting rid of superstitions and errors and biases and all that. I mean, it's a challenge, right? But the thing is that it's our challenge. It's not God's challenge. It's not God's job to tell us. It's not um, it's not someone else's duty to interpret it for us and tell us what God wants. This has always been the case, but now it is our duty to use the natural world, meaning the material world around us as it exists, to make these normative decisions. Like when he distills atheism, I think it's so perfect. I mean, he also thinks he misinterprets naturalism as survival of the fittest, but when we draw from the natural world, what we're taking away from it, subjective reality, objective material reality, what is best for us, yeah, it's our job to determine what's right and wrong in the absence of supernatural forces that dictate it to us.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's the answer, right? That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. It's interesting, like the thought experiment of kind of wiping away all sort of previous moral philosophizing or theology or whatever. And I mean, I feel like, you could make some arguments about religion and science. Like if you wiped them away, like all the past, like what would we come up with, like starting from a blank slate? And I think it's probably true. I don't know what you think, but like we would probably come up with like various systems of monotheism and stuff again. Like they wouldn't be like exactly like Christianity, but they might be similar. And we'd probably rediscover most stuff like scientifically, although in different orders maybe, and like different ways, and like phrase it in a certain different way. And probably it's the same with morality, that we would also, I wonder if we would come up with human rights again, like, starting from a blank slate. I'm not sure really.
I mean, I think humans are more creative than that. I think we would come up with different. I mean, it can look like anything. But yeah, I know what you mean, and this I agree with this section. The idea that people have a natural tendency to religion. I am deeply. I'm kind of offended by it every year at Thanksgiving when you sit down to this meal. I know you do it on a weird day in Canada, but
We've already had our Thanksgiving
oh
a
my
few weeks
God,
ago.
you guys are so out of whack. That's nuts.
Yeah.
So, but the idea, like, it's Thanksgiving, right? So it's
Mhm.
everybody gets together and you cook all this food. You put all your work into it, right? To make a dish. And to make that dish, it relies on so many other people, right? From the person who put it in the bag or stocked it on the shelf or drove it to the supermarket, took it from the farm, put it in the packages, the person who actually picked it, the the person who grew it, the people who built the irrigation and the transport system. And ship the pesticides in and the fertilizer. It's this huge network that's just people who don't know one another, who have no connection to one another, and they're just doing their job. And that's why we're able to live. It's all of these people doing all of this work that makes it possible for us to have a great meal together. And then we bow our heads and thank God for it. That's fucking offensive. That is so rude. Eat and do shit.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
that said, if you drop me in the middle of nowhere and I had to like forage and find a way to sustain my life, right? If I was like a farming for my life, I would be praying for rain every goddamn day. I'd be worshiping mountains, worshiping clouds, whatever I had to do. So yeah, I think it's like I think yeah, as soon as you put people on their own, there's that impulse to find that outside source of power.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah,
What like like the later chapter, he's arguing that humans have sort of a natural tendency to religion, and I think in a particular context, like yeah, I think that that makes sense. Like
totally.
yeah,
No. And I mean like
um,
I'm convinced by the idea like it's religion's never going to go away, but it's going to look really different. I mean go back, I mean probably even 60 years. And now a little more than that. Like Vatican II. Before Vatican II, the Catholic Church, people who attend mass every day now and have attended mass every day of their lives would not recognize a Catholic mass before, 1950. Right, just not. It's completely different practice. If you go back further and you compare the Puritans to the evangelicals who complain about the war on Christmas, like the Puritans would be, I mean, they'd be dunking them for being witches. It's a
yeah,
totally different
yes,
practice, right? How much of their life that you have to devote to God. You
yeah,
can't spend
that's right.
Sunday watching football. It's a
Yeah,
totally different thing. So religious, it's the form and the beliefs and the attitudes and the actions are going to change completely over time and be unrecognizable to as a religion now, but it's always going to exist. I saw like if you watch baseball, I don't know if you've been watching. Oh, it's an American game.
uh-huh.
The
Well,
rules are
the
kind of complicated,
yeah,
but the I mean like wacky stuff was coming up. They have the when your team's losing, you put on the rally cap.
oh
You
yeah, yeah, I
flip
know
your
about
hat
that.
inside out.
Yes,
There
yeah.
was a guy, I think it was at the White Sox game. He was using his cane to like hex the pitcher,
Oh right, yeah.
right? Like all of these supernatural practices that come out of nowhere, right?
Yeah,
Like yeah, of course,
that's
this
true.
stuff is
Yeah.
constantly going to happen.
Mm. Yeah, that's true. I think yeah, and I think that that's the thing. Like how it plays out is the real question. Like in what form it takes, and does it take the form of sort of institutions, or is it just more individualized or whatever? Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. And how we separate those institutions from public policy.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of that's in atheist demand. That's what a secular society looks like. And it's something that we're headed towards, right? Where if we want to preserve religious plurality, right, which means also allowing the atheist majority, atheist meaning here, no religion, unaffiliated, whatever, the small a atheist, for us to live our lives freely, we need to also respect and allow worshipers to practice freely and just not interfere. Which is, I think, I mean, that's an ethical decision, right?
Yeah. Well, it's a well, depending on your perspective, it could be a rights thing, or a right to
Yeah.
religion or something.
Well,
Yeah.
okay. This is one thing. Like I'm into the ethos. Although here's okay. So here's something fascinating I saw the other day,
Uh-huh.
and I was reminded of Aristotelian
Okay.
ethics.
Right.
Um, because one of the big things with Aristotle, to do it really really quick, is a lot of he is about finding practical ways to allow yourself to thrive, right? To live the good life.
Yeah. Yeah. And we should say that like Christian Smith sort of says maybe Aristotle could be like a way forward, maybe.
Yeah,
So yeah.
he thinks there is something to Aristotelian
Hmm.
ethics
Hmm.
that may sort of square the circle. Although it's vague, it's not universal. It's very very particular. So the thing that works for you may not work, won't work for other people. You can't generalize it. You have to use reason and your abilities to find the path between the virtuous path between two vices, right? So gluttony and starvation are two vices. What's the middle path? Try like being stingy and being gratuitous, right? Like how do you find that middle path? But I was watching a documentary about. I was reminded of this, of like the way these can be combined, and how it is amenable to lots of religious practices, daily practices, even. I was watching a documentary on one of the smaller temples in Cambodia, in old. Um, it's not Angkor Wat, one of the old Khmer temples
Oh, okay.
from the 12th century, right? So these things are 900 years old, and it has a moat around it with a land bridge that connects it to the town, so you can get in from this land bridge. And the way it was described by the narrator, so I'm not sure this was accurate. He said that on one side there were angels, so this is on the edge of the
Mm,
bridge.
hmm. Hmm.
On one side there's angels, statues of angels, and on the other side it's statues of demons. I'm sure they're more culturally specific than that, but that's how it was described. And the injunction that people lived by is you need to keep an equal distance between both. That you can't be too close to one or it's bad. If you get too close to one, you get too close to the other. You're not living your life in balance. What you need to do is find the center path between these two vices, essentially. I mean, it's the same as Aristotle. And the amazing thing about it is that it's a land bridge. So it's growing stuff on it. It has grass growing on it. And there's a footpath worn right down the middle where
Mm,
everybody walks,
hmm. Hmm.
which is brilliant because it's a way to it does all of the things that Christian Smith had been talking about, right? How do we how do we teach people this? How do we continue it? How do we create a practice where people, right? They're not invisible. They're not going to defect,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? We internalize it because we do it every day. We internalize it because we see other people do it, and we know if people defect, right? Because we'll see where they walk on the grass. And it's the same as Aristotle. I thought it was brilliant. I loved it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess. I mean, I feel like Aristotle's ethics is like it's sort of purely like your own happiness or whatever, like that why you should sort of find this middle path is like you'll have a more fulfilled life, whatever. And then like it's sort of a happy outcome or whatever that this leads to like a moral society, I guess.
Yeah,
I mean, I think
sure.
like I think Christian Smith says like this is a good answer to the sensible knave because then it's like you don't need to be altruistic or anything. You can just be like you should do this purely for your own good. Like don't even worry about other people. Like
That's the thing.
and that's and that. But then it's like well, about charity or whatever. Like you don't want to collect too much wealth or something. Like you should be charitable. But then I mean I don't know. I guess the interest or like the self interest argument is like I'm not sure what it would be like. You become like what would from collecting too much wealth, like you become disconnected from your society or something. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Why it would
But
be bad? Because I mean, you can't
yeah,
spend it, right?
that's true.
Realistically,
Yeah,
right?
that's a good point.
There's
Yeah.
you get stuck
Hmm.
in this system of acquisition, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah, and then you have to finance like going to space and stuff like
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that.
right.
Yeah.
Marx called the capitalists rational misers, right?
Mm, okay. Right.
Where it's not that they're just hoarding gold in the basement; it's that they
Mm,
spend their gold to get more gold.
right. Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
right? And that is just, it's kind of insane at a certain level if all you spend your money on is ways to make more money.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
it's and that's a way out of that sort of rational trap.
Yeah. Um, we should just. Do you want to say something very quickly about like the science argument?
Well, what is the question? Not the question. His argument there was, he thinks science can never prove that God isn't real. Nathan, do you believe this?
I think that's probably true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. Boom.
Yeah.
That was easy. I agree.
Yeah.
Yep, we all agree on that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. Like I think it.
Science. Oh, by the way, science can also not prove that Pat Robertson is not a demon. So consider that, or at least possessed by demons.
Right.
Science has
Yeah.
never proven that Pat
Mm.
Robertson is not possessed by demons. Just saying.
Yeah.
You can't disprove the negative, so it's silly to
Hmm.
bother.
Yeah.
It's not. Oh yeah, and this is like atheist self defense again. That's not our problem.
Yeah.
Religious people have to prove God, and they've never done it.
Hmm.
So done.
Yeah. Yeah. I think he quotes some like sort of atheist authors who do say things like the science shows that the universe has no purpose or something. And I mean, it's like I mean, it's Christian Smith would be right to criticize that, I think. But like you can, unless you have a very broad view of science, which includes sort of more general like rationality or like philosophizing, whatever. But like, there's no sort of scientific experiment you could do. I don't think just like I don't even know what that could look like. Like what the to disprove that the universe has a purpose. But anyway, so I think we sort of agree on that. Like that maybe though that is a case of maybe atheist overreach, or rather like atheists kind of misstating what science is about, perhaps.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. And I don't know. I haven't encountered too many of those guys, and not really recently. The atheists who are like, science is always right, and we need to put all our faith in science.
Yeah.
Faith. They wouldn't say faith, but like it's
Right.
science. Science is the
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I
Um,
guess you do come across those people now and then.
yeah, but
Um,
it's not really. I mean, it is. It's a. I mean, Smith is right that it's a. Yeah, it's a pitfall, right? You can't go down that road and start making claims that science is going to know everything. I think, is it Daniel Dennett who says like we can scientifically create morality based on
oh,
the
that's.
units of happiness that we can measure in people's brains.
I think that's. Well, I think it's like Sam Harris is probably the main one who did it. I mean, yeah, I think that's like it's such a broad view of science that basically is just like rational thinking. I mean, which is not really like science is something I think more specific than that. But yeah.
Yeah, and I mean this is something that would definitely can't always rely on science. Science can't agree on Pluto, right?
Right. Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a method.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
I mean the amount of stuff that we know is unfriggin' real, and how people figure it out, it's amazing. It changes all the time. Science is a method that embraces its failure. It knows it's wrong, and it always attempts to go further.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
I mean we should wrap up shortly, but like
Yeah.
just the thing about the like Pluto, like it is true. Like what is the experiment you can run to determine if Pluto is a planet or not? Like
Right?
it's about how you define a planet, and that's
Totally.
like and that's not a scientific. I
No.
mean,
It's
that's something that humans kind of decide, and that's
right.
sort of like philosophy of science or something. But
It's a moral question, Nathan. Where is
yeah,
God on this?
yeah,
Come on,
right,
God. Lay
yeah,
it out for us.
hmm
What is Pluto a planet or not? How many
yeah,
planets are there?
yeah,
Why is the Bible silent on this stuff?
yeah,
Why does it not talk about flying cars? Terrible letdown.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I think Pluto's a planet, for the record. Yeah. So I guess all we need to really do is encourage people to like and subscribe,
And if you
and
have any problems with this, please tweet to Nate G. Alexander on the Twitters.
Yes. Yep.
And
Yeah.
are you on the Insta?
No, no. I think
Uh,
like one kind of social media is enough.
yeah.
Yeah.
What
Um,
else? What are the other things? Oh, Red Japan. We got them. Awesome.
no slip up
Big
there.
ups to all our supporters on Patreon and
Yes.
uh, everywhere else. What else we got going on? Any upcoming events, Nathan?
No. Oh, we should plug this interview that we did in the AH plus blog. Todd and I did this written interview. You should check it out. We'll put a link for it.
Link below. Check out the link
Yes.
below. Like and subscribe. Thanks for stopping
Yep.
by.
All right. Okay. So until next time.